Hi, I'm Dr. Mura. So thank you so much for joining DrMuraHealth Beating Type 2 Diabetes Health Challenge. Now, we are so excited for you, and this week, these 5 days are going to be life-changing. The information, the practical tools that we're going to give to you are going to be life-changing. Now, you would have seen it in a private group. I like that quotation of Thomas Edison, where in 1903 already, he saw that the healthcare system was not what it ought to be. Our medical forefathers are talking about how we should change our lifestyle to be able to live healthier. Now, he looked in the future and he thought that the doctor of the future will not just give medicine, but he's going to interest his patient, her patient, in the care of a human frame, in diet, and the cause and prevention of diseases. Now, that is the concept. That's what DrMuraHealth is all about. Yes, medicine is very important, but today the increasing number of people that are getting sick is not of the lack of medication. Often we have a disease that our medication that we have today cannot deal with. But what about the concept of not only the future, the doctor of the future, but what about the patient of the future? And instead of going to your doctor asking just a quick fix, that a prescription, what about asking your doctor, hey doc, why am I sick like this? What can I do to be able to change so that I cannot get sick again? And that's what we hope you're going to get among other things, get out from these 5 days. Now, today we talk about diabetes. Now, diabetes is a major problem. Like I mentioned, diabetes, just even in South Africa alone, 1 person in every 9 South African adults is diabetic. Now, we have 11.3% of our adults that are diabetic. That is over 4 million people in this country are diabetic. And the problem is almost half, about 45%, they are undiagnosed, which means the complication, the issue that we're going to talk about, they come in unnoticed and unchecked, and often it is too late for many people. Now, today focusing on diabetes. Now, diabetes means passing through or siphon. We talk about why it was named that way. And mellitus means honey or sweet. So, interestingly, do you know how the doctor is using to diagnose the diabetes? They use to test the urine of the patient. So the patient will come to the clinic, to the hospital. The doctor will test the urine with their tongue. If it is apparently the urine of a diabetic patient is very sweet, thank God today we don't have to do that. We have advanced laboratory tools we can use it to measure, to diagnose diabetes, as you will see as well. So now, what happened in diabetes, if you have watched our video talking about different types of diabetes, you know that there are different types of diabetes. But generally speaking, broadly speaking, there are 2 types of diabetes. There are type 1 and type 2. In type 1, there is basically no insulin, the hormone that helps to usher the sugar into the cells, as we will see. In type 2, there is insulin, but it's not functioning, it's short. Okay, so generally you and I, when you eat food, what will happen is the food is broken down into small sugars. The sugars are taken into the bloodstream, and then once it's in the bloodstream, that's where the insulin is released. Now, if you come with me on the board here, very quickly. Now, this is a pancreatic cell, right? Now, the pancreas is a small organ which is just, behind the stomach. Now, this organ, though, it's very important. It can cause a lot of issue if it is not working, but also can make things work smoothly if it is working perfectly. Now, the pancreatic gland, it is what we call heterocrine. Now, heterocrine means that it is a mixed kind of function here. We have endocrine and exocrine. Exocrine is composed, 99% of this pancreatic cell is exocrine, right? But endocrine, which is some of the cells, islet of Langerhans, it has only 1%. Now, the exocrine from the cells called acini, this is mainly secreting some pancreatic juices which use in digestion and so forth. That's not our topic for today, but we're focusing more on endocrine. It has alpha cells and beta cells. Now, alpha cells secrete glucagon. Glucagon is only secreted when there is low sugar into the bloodstream. All right. Now, on beta cells, on the other hand, they secrete insulin, and insulin is often stimulated when there is a high sugar in the blood, right? That's what I have. Now, like I mentioned, this is just about 1%. Think of this endocrine as just this much. This is the 1%, okay? This is the 1%. The rest of it is exocrine. Okay, now what is the normal sugar? Generally speaking, the 4.4 to 6.7 millimole per liter, that is considered an average, normal average. Now, when the blood sugar started going lower than 4.4, then the glucagon is activated in the liver, so that it can initially stored the glucose can be now activated and to send it to the bloodstream to supply the organs. Now, when the glucose started going higher than 6.7, then the insulin is stimulated so that can be ushered into the taken away from the bloodstream, going to the cell, as you see. Okay, so this is the blood. Let's say we have high glucose. Okay, this is a glucose. Okay, now what happened is here we're focusing more on a beta cell. Okay, this is the beta cell here, right? Now, this beta cell here of importance, there is what we call the glucose transporters. The glucose transporter, basically, the blood will circulate, and then the beta cell will feel that there is too much sugar. So what happened? So the sugar, the glucose, is going to go in here. All right. Now, this is what we call it GLUT2. The glucose transport type 2. They're not insulin dependent. It doesn't require insulin to open this. It just the sugar goes in. Once it goes in, this in the beta cells here, what happens is, of course, there are many things. There is a DNA, that transcription that takes place and so forth. But the end result, what we're going to have here, the end result is we're going to have insulin created. There are packets of insulin here. Okay, all right. I'm gonna represent insulin as with this insulin. Okay, now not on insulin, there is also other things that are been secreted, like a C-peptide and so forth. We talk about that. Now, when a glucose goes into the cell, it undergoes a different breakdown. Okay, going to pyruvate and the Krebs cycles, going to and so forth. I'm not going to bore you with that. But generally speaking, the end result here with this glucose is going to be creating what we call ATP. Okay, just for more energy. Now, when this ATP is created, there is also here what we have what we call potassium channels. Okay, right. And this the potassium channel. We have potassium here that keep going in, going out. But now, when there is ATP being created, this ATP is gonna come and is gonna touch here on this gate here. Once it touches here, this is gonna be closed. Okay, if this is closed, then you have potassiums that cannot leave the cell. More potassium that cannot leave the cell. Then what happened? What happened is, because now there's too much positivity in the cell, all right? There's another channel here that is going to be activated. This is calcium. Now, when the membrane become more positive, the calcium will start going in. Calcium started going in. Now, when calcium started going in, what happened is that there is on this membrane of beta cells and the membrane of the insulin, they started fusing together. Okay, these started fusing together. Now, when they fuse together, what happened is the insulin is being released into the bloodstream. Okay, the insulin here we started going into the blood. All the pocket insulin started going into the blood. So far, so good. Now, what we're going to have, let me actually present it with another color. Just use this one. So we have insulin in here. We have insulin here. Okay, of importance, the insulin that is going to be secreted, there is insulin, the C-peptide, and also amylin that we're going to talk about later. But specifically, insulin is being secreted. We have insulin, but also remember, the reason why insulin is being secreted here is because there is high glucose in the blood. High glucose in the blood. Now, what is this going to happen? Remember, insulin is being secreted when there is high sugar in the blood, and the whole idea is to get that glucose outside of the bloodstream, going to the organ where it needs to be used. So, what's going to happen here? Let's start with the liver. Come to the liver here. There is also glucose transporters. This glucose transporters is also glucose transport type 2. Now this one, they won't necessarily require insulin per se, but before they can get used, yes, the glucose is going to rush in here. Okay, but before it can get used, we need to have insulin insulin that have to come and attach on the receptors on the cell of the liver. This is called tyrosine kinase receptor, and that is going to activate messenger, intracellular messenger, and enzymes that is going to work on this glucose. Okay. By working on this glucose, is going to transport, again, going to the pyruvate and so forth. We're going to have ATP, okay? And not only that, this glucose is going to be stored as, glycogen. Okay, so this is what happened. So when we're not eating between meals, what the body does is the liver continues to secrete some glucose from the previously stored energy so that the brain can function and so forth. But when you start eating, then the liver has to stop because there is sugar, enough sugar into the bloodstream. So whatever amount of sugar comes in the liver now, the liver just stores it for later use. So far, so good. Now, coming here to the muscle, okay? This is the rough action happening in the muscle. Now, again, you have insulin here. It needs to attach on that insulin receptors. Okay, it's going to, another thing I didn't mention here, this intracellular messenger or enzymes is a PI3K. You don't have to know about that. Just know that they have to be that a messenger that have to attach on the glucose to be able to get to what we talked about. On the muscle cell, again, you have the receptors here. Now, this is very, very important. Unlike the glucose transporters on the liver, the glucose transporters on the beta cells, this one is what called a GLUT4. Now, this one, the glucose will never go inside until the insulin activated this tyrosine kinase receptors, and then you have PI3K, and then only then this messenger is going to come and excite the glucose transporter here, and then only then the sugar is going to come in, right? Now, this is very important. Bear with me. You're going to see where we're going. So far, so good. Now, when we get here, what do we do? We have a glucose. Again, this is oversimplifying things. There are a lot of cascades and events that happen. I just want to go to specific what we need to deal with. We have this glucose. Again, we're going to have ATP that can be created. Another thing is going to work on this it's also going to store glucose into the muscles. Other thing here, we have amino acid receptors here, okay? So again, this PI3K is gonna come and work on this gated channel, amino acid channel, and then amino acid will start coming in, okay? This amino acid, okay? Now remember, amino acid is the building block of protein. So what's gonna happen is amino acid started coming in, this PI3K is also going to work on this amino acid, and it actually can build the protein. Okay, so in here, amino acid is going to be taken in, glucose is going to be taken in, and also we're going to start building the protein as well. All right, so far so good. Now, coming to here now, what we have here? What we have here now is again, we have insulin here. You have high glucose here into the bloodstream. Okay. Now, what's going to do is going to come now to the fat cell. Now, with regard to the fat cell, again, you have just like the glucose transporters that we mentioned here on the muscle cell. This one also have GLUT4. Okay, which means the glucose can never come inside the cell until there is that activation. Insulin have to come attach on its tyrosine kinase receptors, and then this enzymes is being activated, which then is gonna come here and to make sure this gates open. And then when that open, that's the only time the glucose can come in. Okay. Now, when the glucose gets in here, generally, again, glucose is going to be broken down and so forth. But in general, what's going to happen is we're going to have a fatty acid, free fatty acid that's going to be created. And we're going to have what we call a glycerol. The end result is just to make a triglyceride. Okay. That's basically what's happening. So, in the fat cells, glucose is taken in. And also, all this is just to make a little bit more fat. All these are being done by the insulin. All right. Now, Why this is very important to understand this. So now, for a patient talking about, type 1 diabetes, in type 1 diabetes, then they don't have insulin. So what's going to happen? The sugar is going to continue to surge into the bloodstream, okay? And what's going to happen is coming into the beta cell. But remember, beta cells are destroyed. Why are they being destroyed? Okay, generally we don't have any specific cause of type 1 diabetes, although environmental factors plays in, but we know it's an autoimmune kind of response. That is, just when you're sick and there's infection, your body creates immune response to in fact infection. In this case, it can be viral infection, called environmental factor, where the body sees like an antigen, like a foreign body in something that is the body is not used to. When the immune response are being created to go and fight it, it makes mistakes that it also fights the cells in your pancreas, destroying the pancreatic cells. All right. So in that case, the sugar is continuing to go up in the bloodstream. And no matter what happened, the sugar will continue going there, but then these sugars won't be converted into the energy that we need. It won't go into the muscles. It won't get into the fat cells and so forth. So before the discovery of insulin, by the way, insulin was invented successfully. The first patient to receive insulin, this was in 1922. Before that, the patient could just come to the hospital, put them in the ward, and there was nothing to do for them. And also they have like what we call diabetes ketoacidosis and many other complications of high sugar in the bloodstream we're gonna see, and nothing could be done. But with the discovery of insulin, that's a miracle. Now people can actually use that exogenous insulin and be able to live even healthier. Having said that, we see in our future talk that even type 1 diabetic can also develop what we call insulin resistance, we see. So, but generally that's what happened in type 1. Now in type 2 though, what we have in type 2, it is not necessary that the patient don't have insulin, okay? It's what we call insulin resistance. Okay? It's what we call insulin resistance. Now what happened is, okay, you have high stage of blood sugar, you have high stage of glucose in the blood. The glucose comes in. As the glucose comes in, they create insulin. Insulin are being created, the whole cascade of the event that I mentioned, going to the bloodstream. Now, when the glucose started going to the cells though, what happened is, remember, I talked in the muscle specifically, remember how I mentioned that you need this tyrosine kinase for this gate to open so that the sugar can go into the muscle, remember that? Now, what happened is, for some reason, these receptors, okay, they're not working, okay? They are resistant, okay? Now, the insulin is continue pumped to go to see if they can open up so that they can decrease. Remember this, the beta cell and beta 2, alpha cell and beta 2, they work antagonistically, okay? One is only secreted when there is low blood sugar, other one is secreted when there is high blood sugar, so they can take it away from the sugar. So what happened is, when there is too much sugar that continues surging in the beta cells, no matter how much insulin that the pancreas would have created, it feels like it's not enough. So guess what happened? Then you're going to create even more insulin. More insulin continue to be created. More insulin continue to be created, hoping that the sugar can come down. But remember, the more insulin is being created though, because these receptors are not working, okay, then we don't have there are even less of GLUT2, the glucose transport 4, type 4, to usher the sugar in. And that cause what's going to happen is that you're going to have more insulin is being created, accumulating in the liver as well, because the more insulin you create, remember this GLUT2 can let the glucose go in, and for some other reason the glucose, the insulin can go in inside the liver as well. However, it's not going to change to convert the liver is going to continue to think that no, there is not much glucose. Is going to continue breaking down glucose and breaking down also recorded the triglyceride, the fat, pumping them back into the bloodstream, and the more sugar is continue to happen into the bloodstream. So now this is very, very important. Now in type 2 diabetes, generally someone who doesn't have diabetes, you probably create about 40 or even less units of insulin per day. That is physiological insulin. For someone who's a type 2 diabetic though, this can go higher to 50 and 60, because remember, the body feels like, you know, there is too much sugar in the blood, we need to take it away. But as it goes and attaches to the cells, the insulin cannot go through because there is a resistance. Then the insulin is creating even more. And the more insulin, the more with time, these beta cells start getting tired. The more it's getting tired, then the more it's going to start decreasing how much insulin is being created. So far, so good. All right. Now, other thing that I didn't mention, remember, when insulin, this packet of insulin that are being, excreted into the bloodstream, there is also it's insulin, C-peptide, amylin. Other thing, amylin that comes with this is much of amylin continue to accumulate around the beta cells. They're going to destroy the pancreatic cells as well. And that also, with time, continue to decrease of amount of insulin that can be created. That's why with time, someone with type 2 diabetes, you may start them on insulin. Not that initially the patient didn't have insulin, but the insulin continued to overwork until they got tired, and also with the destruction of insulin around in here, that the cell become damaged. Remember, I didn't mention how this is only 1%. This is so tiny, but can do all these wonders. Now, when you started destroying them, and then you're gonna come get less and less. So as a type 2 diabetic, you also may be dependent on insulin. So now, what is the cause of this resistance? That's actually one of the things that we need to find out. Now, just in 1927 already, the researchers took patients. They were actually medical students. They put them into different groups. Now they fed them different diets. Two groups. One group, they fed them high-fat diet that would contain egg yolk, cream, oil, and so forth. And on the other side, they fed them high-carbohydrate diet, which was composed of banana, white bread, sugar, pastry, and oatmeal, and so forth. Now, after 2 days, they wanted to test to see which one would develop some form of resistance. So they give what called all glucose tolerance test to see how it's going to happen. The high-fat group, when challenge them with a glucose tolerance test, the insulin resistance skyrocketed. It became very, very high. This the carbohydrate-fed group, which they passed the glucose tolerance test. Now, everything takes a while in medicine. That will take more decades, about 7 decades, to be able to find out what's really going on. Now, what is the science now found out? What is causing resistance here? All this resistance that doesn't allow the insulin's action is intramyocellular lipid. So you're going to have a fat inside the muscles. Okay, of course, the fat that are going to build up in the fat cell. You have a fat in the liver. All this causing a resistance. Insulin cannot be able to do the action that it should do. So intramyocellular lipid. Now today we can actually measure that with the technology of MRI. You can actually the researchers infuse a patient with a high fat into their bloodstream, and they can in hours you can actually see how much the resistance that is taking place. That is amazing. Today you don't have to infuse people with high fat, with the fat. You can literally feed them like high cheeseburger, whatever it is, and you can actually just see with the MRI technology to see how the insulin started becoming resistance. Anyway, so now fat is a major cause of insulin-resistant type 2 diabetes. Now, when we talk about fat. Now, obesity. Now, we'll talk about obesity. In a pre-diabetic patient, often a pre-diabetic now is recognized as a disease. It's basically when the body is still working hard. Sometime before the insulin become completely resistant, the body is sending more insulin, and somewhat the glucose going in. That is why the checking or the following that a high sugar may not necessarily give the whole picture. That if you only check the sugar in that stage of pre-diabetic, you can check you can do even your fasting glucose may be normal. But remember, it might be normal because now the beta cells are being overworked. They're giving so much insulin to be able to give to be able to stabilize, to give you your normal glucose. So in a pre-diabetic one, the hallmarks is, by the way, of course, we're talking about type 2 and type 1 diabetes. About 95% of patients that are diabetic are type 2 diabetic, and just about 5% is only type 1. Now, what happened is talking about the fat. Now, this fat can be the fat you wear or the fat that you eat. Now, talking about obesity. Now, generally the fat depends where you deposit the fat. The major problem with the fat you put around your waist, okay? That a fat in the abdomen is a major issue. Now, today we can actually measure how much fat is circulating around your bloodstream, and the normal is about 100 to 500 microliters, so forth. And you can actually see that fat continues to circulate, making more insulin resistance to the cell, so that it cannot be able to absorb that. Now, talking about overweight and obesity. By the way, with overweight and obesity, of course, we know the normal body mass index is 18.5 to 24.9. That is the range, okay? But generally, the ideal body weight should be around 23. And 25 to 29.9, that is overweight. Anything above 30, it is obesity. All right, but what we're interested in, especially when you come into our practice, what do? We have a special scale where we do the ideal body weight. Ideal body weight should actually be done with a fat percentage. Now we have this scale where we can actually check how much water, how much fat, how much muscle do you have, and more importantly, where are your muscle? Where is your fat? Because the fat around the abdomen, that is a major problem, and one of the key signs that your liver is becoming fatter. There is what we call non-alcoholic fat liver disease, okay, NAFLD. Now this one, when all this happening, when the more insulin continue to be pumped into the bloodstream, the liver continues to get fatter and fatter. The problem with the liver, though, you are not going to know that you have a problem with the liver because it continues to work even when it is very sick. By the time you have a liver problem, often it may be too late. So the liver becomes fatty, and when it becomes too much fat in the liver, there is also a scarring of the liver, what we call cirrhosis. And with time, the liver's function starts declining. And most of the patients that are diabetic, type 2, or they're even pre-diabetic, they have fatty liver. That is one of the major problems. Now, ideal body weight, very important to measure that. By the way, just as a rule of thumb, you can actually do it at home after this video. To check your waist circumference. When you check your waist circumference, right? Check your height, okay? Now, when you check your waist circumference, divide by your height should be 0.5, right? Now, if it is that is perfect. That way it should be. If it is more, then you know this weight that we put here is not good. That's why, by the way, obesity, that's why you have to have this ideal scan where you can know where your fat is being deposited. Because you can have someone who is otherwise obese, but because the fat is just behind here, may be healthier than you who may meet the same weight, but you have fat around here. That's very, very important. Now, anyway, so the weight is a problem. Remember, it's a fat, intracellular lipid, fat inside your cells, in the liver, in the muscles, that is rendering insulin not to work. Now, how do we diagnose diabetes? Now, generally speaking, diagnosis, we use what we call A1C. Now, A1C, this is hemoglobin A1C. So what happens is, remember, there is hemoglobin in your bloodstream. Now, what happens is the sugar, you know how sticky the sugar is? That sugar, it does attach to the hemoglobin, to the red blood cell. Now, as it attached to the red blood cell, we check it, that's why it's hemoglobin A1C, hemoglobin A1C. Okay. Now, if it is more than, this is for diagnosis for diabetes. If it is more than 6.5%, it is diabetic. That's one criteria that we use. Now, the second tool that we can use is fasting plasma glucose. If it is more than 7 millimole per liter, then we know that is also a marker. If you would have fasted and it is 7 millimole per liter or more, then that is the criteria for the diagnosis of diabetes. Okay, then we can also 2-hour plasma glucose. Okay, now this is when you give all glucose tolerance tests. Some of you that are pregnant, you might have been challenged with that, and that what happened is it give you about 75 grams of glucose, and then within 2 hours they check to see how much your glucose has been taken in, because if you are otherwise normal, the insulin will have been created, and if there are no resistance, insulin would have taken that sugar into the cell where it is needed. Then your sugar shouldn't be high. But a patient that have insulin resistance, then the sugar will continue to be high. It's going to be 11.1 millimole per liter. Other thing that we can do as well, that we do when we do our health expo and so forth, if your random glucose level is 11.1 millimole per liter, that is also the criteria that you have diabetes. All right. Now, showing this is very, very important. That's why when we come to the program that we run, we're not only checking the sugar, we're going to do A1C, but not only that, we need to know how much insulin is being stimulated, because you may be in a pre-diabetic stage, your sugar may look normal, but you're secreting too much insulin. Now, when you have high insulin, that alone is a sign that things are not right. So what do we check? We do C-peptide. I did measure C-peptide. Remember, C-peptide is being secreted together with insulin. So we can measure how much insulin your body is making after you're fasted. But also by measuring the C-peptide, it can give you an understanding how much insulin you're secreting as well. Now, this is very, very important to notice. With this insulin resistance, okay, no matter how much insulin you can make, it's not gonna work. And with time, like I mentioned, the pancreatic cells started getting tired and they're overwhelmed, and until the production started going down and down. Quickly, we're going to talk about it. Then what happened with all this. Number one, the liver is going to become fatter and fatter. Okay, your abdominal obesity will continue growing. The fatter the liver is, the more it doesn't even respond to the insulin, the more it's kind of a vicious circle. Now that's number one. The second thing is kidneys. Remember, because now you have so much glucose going into your blood, in the blood, what happened, the body's going to be overwhelmed. Remember, this glucose is not going anywhere because you have a resistance, insulin resistance, so the glucose cannot go into the cell. So the only route to come out is going to be through the kidneys. Now what happened is going to start having glucose in urine. Hence, that's how they were testing before. By testing urine, apparently it becomes sweet. So because the glucose is going down through the urine, what we call a glucosuria. All right. Now, when you do that, though, the other thing that happens is it's going to affect the brain. Remember, the glucose, the water follows the glucose. So that's why when people that are type 2 diabetic, they urinate a lot. The more you urinate, though, you take too much water from your body because the water follows the sugar. Now, what happens is on the brain, when there's too much water being lost in what we call in hypothalamus, then this is going to stimulate you being thirsty. That's why you urinate a lot and you drink too much water. The brain is telling you, hey, we don't have enough water. Then you drink a lot of water. Now, what happened to the cell? Remember, the muscles are not getting energy no matter how much you eat. Then what's going to happen then is you're gonna have a low energy. And then you're gonna continue eating because you're trying to eat so they can get energy. But no matter how much you eat, the energy is not going to the cell, so you're gonna continue to feel weak. Now what happened is when there is no glucose being created in the muscles will start getting broken down, all right? And that's why you may have that unexplained weight loss, because the muscle and the fat are being broken down. And often this is toward the later stage that you can have the unexplained weight loss as well. Anyway, so today, if anything about it in this presentation, I want you to understand the real cause of insulin resistance type 2 diabetes. Just a little bit of understanding how the body works. The insulin resistant type 2 diabetes is from basically the fat in the muscle, in the cell, in the liver, that are obstructing the insulin, that key. Remember the analogy, the insulin is the key opening the muscle cell so that the sugar can go in. Now when the key is there, but the keyhole is jammed, so it cannot open. Now that is key to understand. If you understand this, then tomorrow we're going to be talking about a little bit more of then what happened, what are the complications that can happen, and then what kind of medication that are given, and why sometimes these medications don't work, because often we miss completely the real root cause of this disease. And it's so sad that, like I just mentioned, the sugar in the bloodstream is just a symptom. Until we go to the root cause of disease, we are not gonna win. And even on my colleague, how the patient are being treated, we teach our patient to just follow that glucose. If the glucose is not high, then you're happy. No. The glucose may look fine, but depending what you eat and so forth, but you need to go to the root cause of this disease to be able to clear the problem. And the sooner you can, the better. Because remember, like I just mentioned, if you take longer, your pancreatic beta cell continue to get destroyed, that you may not come to the reversibility. But if you tackle it while it's still early, then you can actually be able to reverse certain things, and we want to talk more about that. You may need to go through this a little bit, maybe a couple of times, but I hope this was eye-opening in a way. And tomorrow we're going to talk about medication, we're going to talk about complication, and we're going to talk about why medication doesn't work and how medication works. You don't want to miss tomorrow. So thank you so much for watching. Again, if you have a question, please let's put in the chat. How was the presentation today? Writing it on our private Facebook group. Let's see how we can help if any question. Thank you.